Blizzards happen, but they don't typically come with confusion about TSA pre-check or suspension of global entry, which means we have a blizzard with a shutdown hangover. Mexico's military kills a cartel kingpin. Violence spreads nationwide. Travel to and from Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta slows to a crawl. What is next? Obama said aliens are real. Trump said he unwisely released classified information. More disclosures supposedly are coming. What will they reveal? We try to find out. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Blizzards, winter, the Northeast, they go together every single year. Now, the severity of blizzards does differ. And this one, that's why we're paying attention to it, at least in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, may rank one of the biggest of all time. 30 inches of snow or more and winds well above 60 miles per hour. With that has come at least 11,000 flight cancellations and paralyzed or very much slowed public transit in those big cities and many smaller ones. For example, in Providence, Rhode Island, where 32 inches of snow has fallen, high winds and blowing snow made it too treacherous today to plow the streets. Some 600,000 residences in the coastal area of the Northeast are still without power. Now, the storm bypassed Washington, D.C., but the White House and Congress are adding to this mess. Uncertainty reigns over TSA pre-check availability at airports. Global entry to process international flight arrivals appears suspended. And it is unclear how much of FEMA is operating to address blizzard-related emergency. All this because of a standoff over funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Lilia Luciano is on New York's very hard-hit Long Island, and Nicole Skanga will join me here at the family table in just a moment to explain what is and what is not happening at airports and with FEMA. We will also tonight evaluate what could be a very significant event in Mexico. It happened over the weekend, a government takedown of the Jalisco cartel kingpin known as El Mencho, whose influence in southern Mexico through violence and intimidation was almost unmatched. This matters because Mexican authorities were already taking on the Sinaloa cartel in northern Mexico. A two-front drug war inside Mexico is without precedent. Violence broke out nationwide yesterday after word spread of El Mencho's death. Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, urged calm today and said the military could handle what comes next. The U.S. State Department advised Americans to, quote, seek shelter and remain in residences or hotels. It also activated a 24/7 crisis hotline for fearful Americans who are trying to flee. And we're going to try to learn more about the two big drug cartels, Jalisco and Sinaloa, and, if possible, get a sense of what Mexico is up against, and just as importantly, what may come next. Lilia Luciano starts us off on New York's very hard-hit Long Island. Lilia, it's not snowing, that's obvious to me, but you are prepared, and the region still needs to dig out. Catch us up on what's happening.
That's right, Major. You might have heard some thunder or something. There were noises throughout the night. I was staying here in a house that was shaking. That's how hardcore the wind was. We've been hearing sirens, but the travel ban that was in effect for this area was finally lifted. It was initially for 9 a.m., then noon, then, oh, it's a plow that is hitting the road. That's what you heard. I'm not too familiar with this level of plow, so pardon my guessing game here. It was sparkling and everything. I don't know if he was doing what he's supposed to be doing, but the roads are clear. Travel ban was lifted. It was originally for 9 a.m., then noon, then 3 p.m. Now, finally, people can drive, but authorities, of course, are urging caution and are telling people only drive if you absolutely have to. What you're seeing is some wind. Wind gusts have slowed down. It was at its worst about 60 miles an hour. Now we could see a few gusts between 30 and 40 miles an hour. But as you said, the snow has calmed down. I'm standing in what, looks like 2 feet of snow, but it's hardening now. That's why the roads need to be cleared because, of course, all of this snow hardens. It's not that cold. It's in the 30s, high 20s, potentially mid-30s tomorrow. So that could turn into ice, and then that becomes trouble, of course, on the roads. Here, no complaints. I love snow, but, it could be dangerous for people traveling the roads. Bad news for the kids tomorrow, no longer a snow day, back to school. The kids that we met earlier, whose dad was plowing their front yard and spent the whole afternoon making snowmen and playing in the snow, are ready to go back to school tomorrow. Hopefully a lot of other kids in the Northeast will too.
Never heard of a sparkly snowplow, but Long Island gets all the best things in life, apparently. Lilia Luciano, thank you so very much.
There was fire. It was very distracting, Major.
Put it on social media, Lilia. It'll blow up, I promise you. Thank you so much. Travelers, quite honestly and quite understandably, are seeking clarity after the Department of Homeland Security briefly paused TSA PreCheck services because of the partial government shutdown. That program now resumed, but global entry disrupted. Nicole Skanga joins me now with the latest. Catch us up, Nicole.
Yeah, so there was the winter storm, Major, and then there was the sort of self-imposed storm that the Department of Homeland Security unleashed on early Sunday morning when DHS initially said THS PreCheck is shut down, CBP Global Entry, of course, the international program, also shut down, citing limited resources during the partial government shutdown, which has really only complicated things for the Department of Homeland Security, not so much immigration enforcement, but aviation groups, airports, travelers, lawmakers, all sort of pushed back early Sunday morning, and they made the point that removing millions of vetted travelers from expedited lanes would actually have the opposite of the intended effect that DHS said, meaning it would sort of slow the throughput and also worsen some of the security risk that we've seen. So after some urgent talks took place between DHS, the White House, TSA, on Sunday morning, officials concluded that keeping PreCheck open would actually preserve much of the efficiency it needed at the airports, reduce workload on unpaid screeners that are now continuing to work amid the shutdown, and the department restored the program within hours, avoiding some, but not all, Major, of the political storm and backlash.
And so should those listening to us right now for the foreseeable future assume that TSA PreCheck will remain available nationwide?
That is what the Department of Homeland Security has said, citing some flexibility at airports that might see less screeners come in because of the partial shutdown. Obviously, we know TSA officers right now are not getting paid, but as we mentioned earlier, again, what we're hearing from the airlines, what we're hearing from lawmakers is this fee-funded program, fee-funded,
right.
So it's not reliant on the government shutdown, the sort of lapsing in funding that we have seen, Major, actually makes things faster in most cases at the airports, specifically some of the larger airports that we see in places like Atlanta and New York. So for now, if you have TSA PreCheck, expect that lanes will be open when you go to the airport. Do get there a little bit earlier because we have seen some longer lines as a result of this partial DHS shutdown. Now, if you're traveling internationally, CBP Global Entry does remain suspended. So you will have to go to those sort of standard passport control lanes, which can oftentimes take quite a while when you're returning from an international trip. If you want to be enrolled in a trusted traveler program, well, now is probably not your best time, although some airports continue to do that screening for passengers. And importantly, and DHS has doubled down on this, all congressional escorts at airports for those members of Congress remain suspended, Major, throughout the shutdown.
I'm guessing they can probably find their way through the airports.
One would think. And
get by without the escort. I could live without that, but, you know, then again, I'm not a member of Congress. Always breaking it down so brilliantly for us. Nicole Skanga, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Clashes have erupted in western Mexico after the killing of a powerful cartel leader. The Mexican military killed a man known, as I mentioned in the open, El Mencho. Officials there say dozens of soldiers in the Mexican military have been killed in the ensuing violence, while Americans visiting the country, also as I mentioned when we opened the show, are being advised to shelter in place. Karen Wah is in Mexico City and catches us up on the latest. Karen, please.
Hey, Major, good to be with you. So cartel members responded swiftly and violently after El Mencho's death. We have to remember that this is a cartel, a group that the Trump administration has deemed a foreign terrorist organization. They're the biggest, one of the most notoriously violent cartels here in Mexico. So it makes sense that their members acted pretty swiftly to seek revenge on their leader's death in this case. We saw many social media videos with these big black plumes of smoke as armed cartel members blocked more than 250 roads. They set cars and buildings on fire. It's what prompted the Jalisco governor to activate that code red, or really state of emergency for anyone who's in that state of Jalisco.
And Karen, what is the government saying about today, tomorrow, and the rest of the week as they see it playing out?
So, Major, it really depends on where you are in the country. There are still people, including Americans, who are under a shelter-in-place recommendation today if they're in certain areas that are still seeing some violence or under some threat of violence. But the good news is we are starting to see a few flights pick back up, just a couple, just 4, going back into the United States this afternoon. They left from Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta going into Miami and Houston. So if you were one of the lucky few that got on those flights, that's good news. But of course, there's hundreds more waiting to still get back home to the U.S., Major.
Karen Why in Mexico City, thank you very, very much. I want to bring in Stefano Rittendale. He's an Army veteran and chief intelligence officer of the intelligence firm Artorias, and also runs All Source News, which has a very important specialty for this conversation. It specializes in coverage of Mexican cartels, which is a very bespoke kind of journalism. So I'm very glad to have you with us, Stefano. Tell my audience what the Jalisco cartel is, who this leader El Mencho was, and how significant this may be.
Well, first, Major, thank you so much for having me. The Jalisco New Generation cartel, it's only been in existence for about just over a decade. And it was created and founded by El Mencho, the leader who was killed yesterday. And in a decade time, in just over a little over 10 years, from an unknown group, he made it into the most powerful Mexican cartel that we see right now currently active. And even to many points, I would make the argument it is the most powerful criminal organization in the world. CGNG, or Jalisco New Generation Cartel as it's known, has a presence in over 40 countries per the latest DEA threat intelligence assessment that we have available. And he has dominated the cocaine trade. He has been involved in avocado and lime smuggling into the United States and has made multi-billion-dollar industries for stealing Mexican oil. And Jalisco New Generation Cartel is active in many states of Mexico and is also very extremely violent, as we saw yesterday.
Did it surprise you when the news came yesterday that there was this raid, that they got away briefly, but then they died as a result of gunfire with Mexican authorities, how the whole thing went down?
To be honest, this actually came as a shock for a lot of people who were tracking Mexico and Mexican cartels. And Mencho was basically one of those views that in many aspects, because of his power and his reach and his ability to spread violence across Mexico, was viewed as almost untouchable. And so when the news broke, it became pretty shocking. But to be honest, Major, when we started to see the levels of violence impacting such a large swath of Mexico, it became pretty clear that there's very few figures that can do that. And the number one in the top of mind of everybody was El Mencho. And then we got the confirmation, and it really made the explanation clear why violence exploded so much.
So I've been reading about this all day, Stefano, and I mentioned this in the intro to this show tonight. No precedent within Mexico of waging a two-front war against cartels. As I mentioned, Sinaloa in the north, Jalisco in the south. What are the Mexican authorities bracing for? What are they up against in the next couple of days, weeks, months?
Right. So the Sinaloa cartel, for example, they're in an active civil war, and that's causing a lot of violence in large sections of Sinaloa, Sonora, and even in Durango. And what we're actually seeing is one of the factions of the Sinaloa cartel has an alliance now with the Jalisco New Generation cartel, and that's causing violence to really go up across Mexico, even before yesterday's death of El Mencho. Sinaloa itself saw over 400% increase in homicides in the state for kind of the latest data that we have. Violence has been going up in Mexico, and we're seeing it in a much more militarized fashion than most people are probably used to. But the Mexican government clearly is trying to get the situation under control. The operation yesterday against El Mencho sends a message that they are willing to take the Mexican cartels. And I think that's a message also to the Trump administration saying, we can take El Mencho, give us the intelligence support, but do not do unilateral strikes because we want to handle it. Just give us intelligence and we'll do it on our own.
Pick up on that point about the importance of U.S. intelligence as something to supplement what the Mexicans knew or give them something they didn't know in order to carry this out.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, the intelligence aspect, obviously, there's probably areas that the Mexicans are aware, and obviously we have capabilities that the Mexicans won't have, specifically signal intelligence and imagery capabilities that we obviously give to the Mexicans and make them much more successful. We've seen a huge surge in intelligence assets over Mexico, such as drones, P-8, Poseidons, aircrafts that really provide a lot of intelligence to the Mexicans for them to execute. And more importantly, a lot of the Mexican units that are really tasked with these high-value target operations are vetted by the U.S. government, and they have a long history of working with U.S. law enforcement or military personnel, either the FBI or DEA or even the U.S. military. And these vetted units are the ones that generally are used to conduct these high-value targets, such as the operation that led to the death of El Mencho. Those guys are trained by the U.S., those guys are funded by the U.S., and they receive intelligence by the U.S., and that's why it was so successful.
Very quickly, Stefano, last question. I've read today that, yes, you can take out the kingpin, but often these are multi-layered organizations, the cartels, and the middle is sometimes just as important as the top. Evaluate that.
Yes, and you know, this for Jalisco New Generation Cartel, now that El Mencho is dead, that's what I'm looking for this week. Who is going to succeed him? There's various names going up. One of them is his right-hand man known as 03. But as you alluded to, it's some of these regional leaders that we all have to keep an eye on. And the question is there going to be a coalescing, an agreement, and who is the leader? Is it going to be, let's say, one of the regional leaders as El Jardinero, who's a key gunman and a key figure within the organization? Do they all agree and coalesce around it? Or do you see a split? And then when splits happens is generally when civil war within cartels happen. And that's unfortunately causes violence to just go up. So those are the key aspects I'm looking into. The middlemen are very key in this to see if the cartel continues to operate as nothing changes or a civil war happens and violence goes up.
Stefano Rittendale, I appreciate the expertise and the time very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Still to come, President Trump gets set to deliver his first State of the Union of his second term. Why some Democrats are going to skip the speech. Plus, possible 2028 contender Gavin Newsom talks about his SAT scores and learning disabilities, or implies there's some relationship there. He's done this before, but this time that conversation generated a backlash. We will explore what this is or isn't all about. First, there was the UFO, then the UAP. President Obama and Trump have indicated the government knows more than it has shared. I'll speak with a Navy pilot about what she saw and what is already known. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Takeout. President Trump set to deliver his first State of the Union address of his second term. I know you're thinking, wait a minute, didn't he give one last year? Yeah, it's an economic address to the Congress. First year, it's never the State of the Union for an incoming president. That's why we're calling it that. Several Democratic lawmakers announced, well, they're going to skip it. Among them, California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York. CBS Sunday Morning national correspondent Robert Costa joins me now. What should we look for? Robert?
Well, this is not going to be a letter to Congress like some of those more understated presidents have done. This is his moment. What I'm really watching is foreign policy. All of my sources around President Trump say some kind of action is potentially in the offing when it comes to Iran.
Like he will announce it, or this has just happened, or while I speak to you, this?
It could be. I think a lot of it depends on the intelligence and the situation on the ground, but foreign policy will probably be top of mind.
So that would mean possibly Iran.
And even if we have not attacked Iran or Israel hasn't attacked Iran, should that ever take place in the coming days, having a rationale explained to the American people will be very important with this speech. Most people, when we're out in the country talking to voters, are not paying attention to the minor details and the important details of what Iran may or may not be doing with nuclear programs.
President said today it's going to be a long speech because I have a lot of accomplishments to talk about. What part of the domestic first year of Trump 2.0 do you think will be most emphasized?
The reaction to the Supreme Court on trade and tariffs, that was such a keystone.
He'll come in hot on that.
Not only will he come in hot, those justices will be sitting just a few feet away. But he really has to make the economic case to the country. Working voters remain the voter when it comes to political coalitions in this country. They moved toward President Trump in some respects in 2016, 2020, 2024. President Biden knew in a way how to really work them over with his labor ties. Can he keep that working coalition together or not?
You read the polls as much as I do. We both know President Trump reads them.
Oh, sure.
They are not good right now. They do not paint a positive picture for him or Republicans, but for him, some polls have him at 36, 37. Even the most generous Rasmussen polls have him in the low 40s. This is not a place that he would like to be or expected to be after year one of Trump 2.0.
The upside for the White House when you talk to top Republicans is that he's not running against any Democrat at the moment. Yes, Gavin Newsom's out there with a book tour. Other Democrats are making noise. You have Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer, the minority leader in both chambers, out front for the Democrats to a point. But President Trump's real battle, in my view, as a reporter, is against himself. Can he reclaim his momentum from his 2024 victory on economic issues and make the case that, yes, tariffs might have a bit of a jolt right now with the Supreme Court, but overall his trade policy is working, his economic policy is working to try to lower prices. I'll be listening closely. What does he offer as evidence to working voters that it is a successful policy?
One thing I have come to watch in these addresses is there anything that the president does to surprise? And I always wonder, because President Trump has the capability and he has the knack to turn a corner, to make a surprise, to do something you don't expect and reclaim something of a lost momentum. I've got my eye on that tomorrow night.
Do you have any guesses?
I don't, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did something in the immigration space to try to recast the narrative that has been damaging, severely so, the last 6 weeks.
And I've been watching the lack of a response to a point of the administration and what's happening in Mexico. I wonder, is he going to lean into what's happening with some kind of action or new policy? I'm also watching America 250. He loves ceremony, theater, patriotic imagery. He's redoing the East Room and the East Wing of the White House. He's doing so much in Washington to put his imprint on the whole city. What's he going to do to the country to really say he's going to move in that direction?
The other thing that's on my mind is, will this speech be viewed, let's say, a month from now, 2 months from now, as the place where the marketing of the big, beautiful bill was revitalized? Because the White House and all the congressional Republicans leaned so heavily into that legislative effort last year. The president believes, his advisors, the Treasury Secretary, keep saying the refunds are going to be enormous. It's going to have a huge jolt for the economy, not just at the upper end of the K-shaped economy, but at the lower end. Is tomorrow night going to be the place where he tries to revive the sense of appreciation for that big legislative push?
And I think the presentation really matters. When you think about President Biden's final State of the Union when he was president, what do we remember? He tried to bring the energy when a lot of people thought he didn't have it. Does President Trump, and he's not the same President Trump in terms of presentation style that he was in 2016. We all change over the course of a decade. Does he really bring the energy to get that party standing on its feet, to get the country sit up in its seat as they watch it? Or is it more just kind of a long, when Bill Clinton was at his best as president in the State of the Union, he brought this vital energy to the process. When he was at his worst as president, it felt like the State of the Union went on for 2 hours, and it was a lecture at a university. President Trump, he has the same challenge, even though he's a communicator for a living.
Very quickly, before I let you go, Robert, the Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who you name-checked a moment ago, has told his House colleagues, if you show up, no signs, no antics, just be there. If you don't want to be there, don't show up. But don't be a foil, visually or otherwise, for this president.
Most Democrats think Hakeem Jeffries is spot on with that guidance. The Democrats have to focus as much as the Republicans. They're on the brink of power, but if they become a story of distraction versus policy, they're missing their own opportunity.
Always a pleasure, Robert Costa.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Stay with CBS News for live coverage of President Trump's State of the Union address and the Democratic response that will follow. I will kick off our coverage at 5 o'clock Eastern with a special edition of, well, you know what it's called, The Takeout. CBS Evening News anchor Tony DeCoppel will lead our coverage from Washington starting at 8 p.m. with the speech itself scheduled for just a tick after 9 p.m. Eastern. And afterward, you can watch the Free Press post-State of the Union show on CBS News 24/7. Awkward, racially insensitive, both, neither. Remarks Gavin Newsom made that has some, particularly on the right, criticizing the California Democratic governor. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom's on a book tour. He's got a memoir. And during a conversation in Atlanta, he said something that some conservative critics have described as racist. He was with the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens. Watch this for yourself.
I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. You know, I'm a 960 SAT guy. and I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940.
Columnist for the Free Press and CBS News contributor Coleman Hughes joins me now. His specialties, race, public policy, and applied ethics. Coleman, I'm very glad to have you on the program. Give me your sense of what my audience just saw and what you saw.
So when you look at it out of context, I admit it does look bad. But when you actually understand the context, you realize this is something Gavin Newsom has said before. He said it in front of a white interviewer where there was presumably no black people in the room. It's one of his rehearsed political talking points. And what he's trying to do is tell you, first of all, that he has dyslexia, that he's someone, though, he's been very successful. He's one of the many people that actually struggles to read quickly. He's not saying that black people are dumb, or he's not really trying to say anything about race in general. What he's saying is he's trying to relate to the median American by saying, I got an average, even a slightly below average SAT score. And many people on the right are doing what has traditionally been a strategy of the left, which is to pull a quote out of context and make it sound racist in order to smear a political opponent.
And to your point, Coleman, that is to say, Gavin Newsom told my colleague, Robert Costa, who was just on the set with me, the very thing you mentioned, that he's dyslexic, that he grew up with that and still suffers from that learning disability. He can't read a prepared speech, meaning remarks in front of him. He has to sort of go with what's in his head and what's in the moment. And lots of people who are trying to enter the national political stage try to make themselves more approachable, more authentic, more reachable. Is that, from your vantage point, what he was trying to accomplish?
It's clearly what he was trying to accomplish. He's trying to pass the beer test here. And this problem of having dyslexia but being a relatively smart person is actually very common. I've had two different people on my podcast alone, Ezra Klein and Scott Barry Kaufman, one of whom went on to teach at an Ivy League school. And I think both of them were placed in special ed as kids for having various learning disabilities. So this is a common thing. You can see the crowd reacted with recognition. And it's something he's rehearsing. It's something he's testing out, and it looks like it's resonating with audiences. Once again, I think this is just partisan point scoring. I don't think it's going to land. I think people understand in the age of X that these malicious quotes taken out of context are just being used for partisan point scoring and don't actually reflect any deep point made about the candidate.
Coleman, do you think this is symptomatic of a kind of outrage industrial complex on social media?
Oh, absolutely. We've been living it since, roughly 2014, when everyone and their mom started being on Facebook and primarily digesting their news online. The ability to just circulate a clip out of context we've seen it over and over and over again. And the deep irony here is that it's usually Democrats doing this to Republicans. I remember during Trump's first term, Trump called Maxine Waters low IQ. Now, this, again, out of context, it looks like a white guy calling a black woman low IQ. Is he invoking racial stereotypes and racial tropes? But then you widen the context, you realize Trump has called dozens and dozens of white people low IQ. It's his favorite insult, right? So there's no reason to believe there was anything racial behind it. And here now, Republicans are now doing the exact same thing to Gavin Newsom and becoming hypocrites in the process.
So when the White House, meaning President Trump, reposted a video with the last 2 seconds, including ape images generated by artificial intelligence of Michelle Obama and former President Barack Obama, Tim Scott, Republican senator from South Carolina, African-American, called out the White House. But on this, he also did as well, and I want to read it to you. Black Americans, he's referring to Gavin Newsom, aren't your low bar. We've built empires, created movements, outworked, outhustled, outsmarted people like you. Stop using your mediocre academics as a way to patronize communities. It's ridiculous. Evaluate that.
So the bigotry of low expectations is a real thing, and it is a real problem on the left, but this is not it. This was Gavin Newsom talking about his own dyslexia. Bigotry of low expectations is when you have one bar for white people and Asians and other ethnic groups, and you have a lower bar for Black people, and you don't actually expect Black people to meet that bar, right? And it's a big problem because it's empathy gone wrong. It's empathy gone too far to the point where it hurts the very communities that you're trying to help. This is not an example of that. This is just Gavin Newsom being taken out of context, trying to talk about his own personal struggle and relate to the entire electorate of all races.
And very quickly, Coleman, you are not the kind of person who would instantaneously or snap in a knee-jerk way to defend Gavin Newsom, I gather.
It's the very first time I've defended Gavin Newsom in my entire life.
That's the answer I thought might be forthcoming. Coleman, I appreciate the time very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Another matter for Kash Patel that falls into the category of controversy, this time after a beer-soaked gold medal celebration with the men's U.S. hockey team. Our political panel will describe what it thinks about that and many other topics next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Oh, FBI Director Kash Patel and government-funded flights. It's kind of a topic. This time it was about, well, going to the Olympics, Milan, trip to Italy. And spotted is one way of describing it. It was hard to miss the FBI director with the U.S. gold medal winning men's hockey team. In the locker room, there was beer involved anywhere. Anyway, he got there on a government plane, but he has a history on talking about FBI directors and their government-funded flights. Let's listen.
I'm not the defund everything guy. I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane.
Or maybe not. Let's bring in our political panel. Co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Adam Green, former Michigan Republican Congressman Fred Upton. Fred, Kash Patel, and the plane.
You know what? As they say, tell the truth the first time, and you don't have to worry about it the second. I mean,
and this is not the first instance where the FBI director has been on the plane going to things that are not related at all to his government job or very tangentially related to his government job.
As he said, somewhere on today's news, well, this was set up months ago. Well, before we went on, we talked about the Winter Olympics.
We know when the Olympics are.
It's coming in 8 years.
Yeah, we know when the Olympics are.
Utah, so
we know we can schedule meetings with Italian law enforcement officials around the Olympics. Yeah. Adam?
Well, imagine if Kash Patel...
He wasn't for prohibition, though, right? I mean, that's...
Right.
He took no pledge during his confirmation. Imagine if Kash Patel was a serious person and had gravitas and was known for doing his job, protecting the American people, releasing the Epstein files and being diligent about that, taking on billionaire oligarchs who are funding Trump right now. And he said, I was there for business. We might believe him. But nothing in his record, nothing in his reputation says this is a serious guy. Everything is about self-serving, being performative. So it's so likely that he was out there, just for his own fun. But really, this is a continuation of what people see from this Trump presidency, which is using the government for self-enrichment, not actually going to bat for the American people.
So those in our audience might remember John Barron. Not the person John Barron. You never met John Barron, but it was a name that Trump used in his 1980s and 1990s sort of days of talking to the New York tabloids to hide his identity and place things in the tabloids about Donald Trump. So why do I bring up John Barron? Well, this happened on C-SPAN Friday.
Well, this is John Barron, and this is the worst decision you ever have in your life, practically. Jack's going to agree with me, right? But this is a terrible decision. And you have Hakeem Jeffries, he's a dope, and you have Chuck Schumer, who can't cook a cheeseburger. Of course these people are happy. But true Americans will not be happy.
C-SPAN had to put out a statement today that was not President Donald Trump posing as John Barron, calling into C-SPAN after the Supreme Court nullified his emergency use of tariffs on Friday. Fred, were you fooled?
Well,
did you think that was Trump?
Actually, I did not think it was him. And like you and you, Adam, we've listened to Trump a lot, right? I mean, I was driving back here
since
on
the summer
Friday
of 2015
from Michigan. So I had an 8.5-hour drive, and we listened to the entire press conference that he had on Friday after the decision. My wife said, that is not quite the accent that Trump has.
He was trying, though.
He tried.
I mean, the problem is it was plausible, right? right? I mean, again, a continuation. Trump is not someone who is focused on the problems of the American people. He's the kind of person who would call into C-SPAN and loves talking to reporters at 11 p.m. at night and loves just riffing and tearing down the White House and doing anything but actually doing his job that people expect him to do.
He'll do it next week. Now
exactly. He'll call it a C-SPAN eventually.
That's true.
So I want to talk to you about the Texas Senate Democratic primary, Adam, because this is kind of in your wheelhouse. And I came across, anyone can come across it, who's a subscriber of The New Yorker, as I am. I know what that category that puts me in. Guilty as charged. Anyway, James Tallarico, Jasmine Crockett. There's a fascinating thing I want to read to you that comes from the new Democratic Party chair in Texas, Kendall Scudder. Quote, more than 60% of our 9,000 precincts don't have a Democratic precinct chair. And the bottom 20 precincts for turnout in the last election were blue ones. You can't put a sack of flour in the oven and make biscuits. This goes to what the state of the Democratic Party is or isn't in Texas, quite separate from whoever the nominee may or may not be. Evaluate that.
Yeah. Well, first, let's make a little news right here.
Okay.
We have about 10,000 members in Texas. We surveyed them recently.
Your organization?
Our organization, Progressive Change Campaign Committee. And by 57% to 23%, people favored James Tallarico. That says that he is inspiring people right now. And I believe that this race is, in some circles, being misinterpreted as left versus moderate. Those labels don't really matter. What it actually is are Democrats content to just be an anti-Trump party? And Jasmine Crockett is an effective partisan jouster. Or are we going to have a vision and inspire people again and fight on economic grounds for working people, for corporate accountability, for better quality of life? And that is what he has made the centerpiece of his campaign. So to that state party chairperson, the enthusiasm for someone like Tallarico is what it will take to get people to raise their hand again and say, sign me up. I'm willing to lead locally because we actually have leadership in Washington and in Texas.
Is that suggestive of something you're going to be announcing in the not too distant future?
Tomorrow we will be making a major announcement in this race. You could probably tell where we're going with that. But again, we believe this is about more than just Texas. It's about the future of the Democratic Party.
Fred, I'm not going to ask you about Tallarico or Jasmine Crockett. I'm going to ask you about a Republican in the Texas delegation, Tony Gonzalez. An aide committed suicide by setting herself on fire. Romantic links to Tony Gonzalez. There are now text messages that have come out, and more Republicans are saying this cannot go on.
It can't. It's trouble. I served with Gonzalez. Their primary, as we know, is next Tuesday. He has a primary. It was a tough road, going to be a tough road for him anyway. But it's pretty easy to figure out if this is real or not. And the ethics rules are pretty clear in the House.
Tell my audience what they are.
If you have a relationship, sexual relationship with a staff member,
you're out.
You're out.
That's what the rules are.
That's in the rule.
Okay. Fred Upton, you get the last word. Adam Green, I appreciate that news because it was news and I heard every single word of it. Okay. So to my audience, I appreciate it very much. As President Trump considers lifting the lid, metaphorically and otherwise, on UFO and UFO-related information, I'll speak with a Navy pilot who says she had a close encounter. And she has much more to say than that. Next, here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Last week, President Trump said he was beginning the process to order the release of government information currently in the government's possession on aliens and UFOs. The terminology now is UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, one of the most prominent sightings in this realm was in 2004, an incident when two Navy pilots saw a so-called tic-tac shaped object off the coast of Southern California, more specifically about 100 miles south of San Diego, where I grew up. Here's how retired Navy Commander David Fravor described it to Bill Whitaker, correspondent with 60 Minutes.
The tic-tac still pointing north-south. It goes and just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there.
He said it was about the size of his F-18, with no markings, no wings, no exhaust plumes.
I'll see how close I can get. So I go like this, and it's climbing still. And when it gets right in front of me, it just disappears.
Alex Dietrich, who was also on that mission, saw the apparent UAP, UFO, and joins us now. Alex, I'm very glad you're with us, Explain to my audience the importance of what you saw and what you believe the government already knows in this space.
Thanks for having me. And first, I'll say that there were 2 pilots and 2 WIZOs. So we had 4 folks who saw it visually, and it was tracked on multiple sensors by other witnesses in that encounter. And we saw something that we couldn't identify in 2004, something that appeared to violate what we understood about physics and aerodynamics in that moment, and we reported it through our chain of command. So I'm not in the business of sensationalizing it, but I am in the business of being accurate. What does that mean for us right now? I think that transparency is the right instinct. What I hope that people understand is that releasing files is a process and not a revelation. It took over a decade for our Tic Tac video to become public, and what gets released, what gets declassified, and what those documents actually say are all very different questions. So I would encourage people to be patient and to keep their expectations managed.
And is it possible, Alex, that even if these things are released, we would just know a number of things that are unexplained and not have an answer or an explanation for what has been encountered?
Yeah, and I would also say, folks get carried away when we use the term aliens. And I think that it's important to reframe here and say, instead of "are there aliens," to say, what's operating in our restricted airspace that we can't identify? And whether it's adversarial technology, an unknown atmospheric phenomenon, or something else entirely, this is genuinely a national security and flight safety issue. So that's the question that should drive this disclosure effort.
In that 60 Minutes piece, there was a good deal of conversation that Bill had with various people interviewed, yourself, the other gentleman, Mr. Fravor, that this could be some technology that the United States isn't aware of, but to your word a moment ago, one or more of our adversaries might have mastered. That's why you consider this something under the national security heading.
I do. I think it's important, and I think it's something that we need to be methodical and rigorous in our investigation. We need to make sure that this isn't a national security threat, that this doesn't pose a threat to our flight safety. If you're out there in a commercial airliner, I'm sure that you don't want something in the airspace that the air traffic controllers aren't aware of. And then if there is something out there that's curious and interesting for the scientific community, absolutely, let's investigate. Let's get some more data.
Let me ask you this, because few people are more aware of the laws of physics than pilots. When you say the thing you observed and the others observed, the 4 of you, defied what you understood about the laws of physics, what exactly do you mean?
So we spend a lot of time practicing our maneuvers, using our time practice in the cockpit to really understand the way that our aircraft are moving and how to optimize that in order to get an advantage. We want to get a shot off. We want to make sure that we're defending ourselves against adversaries in those encounters. And so we practice, we calibrate our eyeballs in order to be able to recognize those moments. And when we encountered this strange thing on November 14th, 2004, it defied the laws of physics. We weren't sure what we were looking at or how it was doing what it was doing. And I've tried over the years to normalize this for other aviators.
Right.
Yep.
I hate to do this to you.
For a long time, pilots didn't report. Yeah. And so that stigma has real consequences. And so I want people, if they see something, to be able to say something. Yep.
Alex, I appreciate the time very much. Thank you so much. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Daily Report coming your way next.